All right. So at this point, we've pretty much talked research-based writing to death, but there's one thing left on the table that we have not yet covered, and I wanted to give you a quick 2 or 3 minute brief tutorial on parenthetical in-text citations. So what's a parenthetical in-text citation? So whenever you use outside research, obviously the right and ethical thing to do is to give credit where credit is due. And one of the ways you do that is through the signaling phrase, like we discussed, or I lectured on the sandwich method. But there's part two to that, and that is you need to cite your research. And this means more than just the reference entry on your references page, which all of you already have that done because you did it for the bibliography. But there's something called a parenthetical in-text citation, which essentially tells your reader where exactly in your reference list should they look for the quote that you're using. So let's take a quick look at how to compose parenthetical in-text citations in APA format. And I think at that point, you'll be so sick of me discussing research-based writing that you'll be more than happy to move on to our next thing, which will be a discussion regarding the book of choice genre assignment. So we've talked about APA format in an overall sense: font size, spacing, title pages, how to compose an interesting two-part academic title, references. That we've done, right? And if you need help setting up your essay in proper APA format, remember, you have the examples you can look at, you sort of follow them as an exemplar, and you have the APA template. But we haven't talked about APA parenthetical in-text citations. So what the heck is a parenthetical in-text citation? So what you need to remember is whenever you use outside information, you want to give credit where credit is due. And that's done often through the signaling phrase, letting your reader know that it's a quote through placing it in quotation marks. But also there's a parenthetical in-text citation that's included. And that sort of lets your reader know more specifically in this list of references, where can I find this quote if I wanted to find it myself out in the world? What you need to remember is that parenthetical in-text citations will include 3 pieces of information: the author, the date, and the page number. Now, it's common that some of those things may not be available, and we'll look at those exceptions. But 9 times out of 10, you're able to give that information to your reader: the author, the date, and the page number. When I say date, what I mean is the date the piece was published. So let's look at 2 different examples, because there's some variation behind how a parenthetical in-text citation will look depending on how you introduce it. So when you quote from a piece of research, if you introduce it with a signaling phrase that has the author's name in it, then you simply put the date directly after their name. And the idea here is that you're still including the 3 pieces of information: the author's name, or last name, I should say. This has the full name, but you just only need the last name: the author's name, the date, and the page number. So in this case, according to James Johnson, 2023, students often had difficulty using APA style, especially when it was the first time, end quote, page 199. So you notice all 3 pieces of information are there: the author's name, the date, and the page number. However, there are instances where you might introduce a piece of research without the author's name in your signaling phrase. You might use just a general statement like here: one professor notes, quote, students often had difficulty using APA style, especially when it was their first time, end quote, Johnson, date, page number. What's important to realize between the 2 of these is that what's included in both of them is author's last name, date, and page number. The only difference is in this one, the author's last name appeared in the signaling phrase. So it wouldn't make sense to then list it again after the quote, because you've already told us here. In this one, you say one professor notes, and you have to give us all the information because I don't know who this one professor is. And so author, date, page number goes after the quote. So if you use the author's name in your signaling phrase, the date goes directly after their last name and the page number after the quote. If you leave out the author's name and use some sort of general statement introducing your quote, then all 3 pieces of information will come after the quote: author's last name, date, and page number. All right, now there's always going to be exceptions. And now that we're in the time where information is coming from so many different places, like imagine citing a TikTok video. How are you going to give a page number, right? So there's so many different exceptions. And basically, before I even go into the specifics on this slide, if you read the APA manual, it says this: do the best you can with the information you have to make it as clear and logical to your audience as possible. So, author, date, page number. Do the best you can giving that information to your reader. But if you can't, if for some reason those things aren't available, there are rules in place. Like the first one, let's say you don't have a page number, right? And so here's an example. Imagine a website, like you go to read Moby Dick, right, which is now public in the public domain on archive.org. You can read Moby Dick for free. You don't have to buy it. But it's all one web page. You just scroll up and down, right? Moby Dick, which in pagination form, which is a fancy word for page numbers, 500 plus pages, but here it's just one website that you scroll up and down. So imagine citing from Moby Dick, and you're like, well, wait a second. I don't know how I'm going to give a page number. It's all just page one because I'm just scrolling up and down this web page. What APA says is, if it is reasonable to give a paragraph number, you can use PARA period and then do the paragraph number. But they give that sort of addendum in all caps. If it's reasonable to do so, then tell us the paragraph. In the scenario where you're reading Moby Dick online and there's thousands of paragraphs, it's not reasonable to do so, in which case APA says this: just leave it out. Then just ditch the page number. Don't even worry about it. And the reason you would ditch it is most humans on the planet now know that you can hit Control F and search a document to find something. And APA even says that. It says, look, if there's no way to give a page number and no way to give a paragraph number, then leave it up to your reader. They'll find the research or the direct quote they want to find. All they need to do is search the document in question. If it's a PDF, it's a website, it's a Word file. In all those cases, it's just Control F, and it opens a Finder window, and then you just type in a few words from the quote, and you will be brought directly to where the quote is. So to boil that all down, if you have the page number, give it to us. If you don't have the page number and it's reasonable to give a paragraph number, give it to us. If it's unreasonable to give a paragraph number and you don't have a page number, leave it out altogether, in which case you would just give the author's name and the date. Some other little things to be aware of. Let's say the author is not someone who is available. For example, maybe it's written by the Department of Health or the FBI.gov, right? In which case you don't have an author's last name. So APA, again, they make these sort of concessions. They say, we understand that there are all types of information out there on the internet, and you may not have an author's last name. So if you don't, give us the title of the source in place of the author's last name. So like in this example, right, let's pretend like the student took this quote from a website that we can't find an actual author's name, but you have a title of the web page, right? They have a title on top of the web page. Well, in that case, you can just use the title of the web page in its place and do the best you can with the rest, right? You have the date and the page number. No date. This happens from time to time where you do not have a date. And if that's the case, again, APA says, do the best you can. If you have a date, give it to us. If you don't, you can use N period D period, signifying no date. You're telling your reader, look, I looked and there's no date. I can't find one, but here's the quote, but there's no actual date attached to it. All right. Last thing I want to go over, block quotations versus short quotations. So if you have a quotation of 40 words or more, APA says to set it up as a block quotation, and that's what you're looking at here. Essentially what happens is you take your quotation and you tab it in. You tab it in twice, and you notice there's no quotation marks now. The sort of concept is APA thinks, well, if you visually set it off for the reader this way, they're going to know it's a quote. They're going to look at it and say, there's something different about this piece of information right here. It's sort of set off as a block by itself because the block tells us it's a quote. So That's only 40 words or more. Most quotes are going to be below 40 words or more, but if you have 40 words or more, then you set it up as a block quotation like you see here. All right, for anything else, of course, reach out and let me know. And there's a ton of resources available on Blackboard that will help you as well. Um, you have the tutors in the Writing Support Center. You need only go up to the second floor of the library. And likewise, you have Reza Clifton, who is our dedicated graduate assistant, who is available to have one-on-one appointments with students and help them as much as you need. But you have all that stuff at your disposal. But of course, I'm here too. So reach out with whatever questions you have, and really good luck on this research essay. I know you will all do fantastic.